What a delight. Thank you very much for that. Very nice reception. Is everybody going to vote tonight? Yeah! Are we going to win? Yeah! We always win, right? Yeah! The cause of liberty is on a roll, let me tell you that. This country is radiant raring. And tonight we are going to send a very loud message to the rest of the country. And I'll tell you what, I've said so many times, the American people are way ahead of Washington. Washington is sound asleep. We're on the right track, so make sure they hear our message all the way to D.C. And that message is not complex. Most people in this country realize that we're having problems. Like we spend too much money now and then, and we borrow too much money now and then. The government grows and leaps by leaps and bounds. But one of the things that they have done over these last 100 years that has been very detrimental, especially in the last 40 years, is they want government to grow endlessly. We don't have the money. They run out of borrowing power. Guess what they do? You would have never guessed. They start printing money. And, of course, that leads to more problems. Now the world's facing a debt crisis. And the debt crisis is a natural consequence, a predictable consequence of the monetary system that we have. So we embarked 100 years ago with a central bank, which Thomas Jefferson tried so desperately to prevent. So they haven't done a very good job. They took the dollar of 1913, now is worth 1 penny. So I would say it's time we celebrate next year the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve by repealing the Federal Reserve Act. But a lot has happened in the last 4 years. These problems have been going on for a long time. It'd be nice if we could blame one person or one administration, but it's been going on a long time. So many young people here, I think you're realizing you're getting a bad rap for what you're inheriting. You'd like a much better deal, and the better deal can be found in less government and only sending people to Washington who have actually read the Constitution or will obey the Constitution and take their oath of office seriously. Which would do so many wonderful things for us. Take, for instance, if you're tired of the wars, I hope you're sick and tired of the wars that we're involved in. What if we had the return to the Constitution? The founders made sure in the document, in the Constitution, that the wars would only occur not by the executive branch, but only by the people through their representatives in Congress. That's the way all wars should be declared. If necessary, they should be declared, won, and get them over with, and come home. That's the way it was supposed to be done. But since World War II, we have gone to war without a declaration. And for that reason, we essentially have not won one of those wars. It has added a lot of tragedy. Just in these past 10 years, these wars that we're fighting in the Middle East, over 8,500 Americans have died. 44,000 have come back with serious injuries and amputations and all kinds of problems. Hundreds of thousands looking for help because of post-traumatic stress syndrome. At the same time, economically, it's been very damaging. It has added $4 trillion to our national debt. That is what you're inheriting. This is the reason why it is so important. If you're talking about peace and prosperity, you have to change the Constitution and have a lot less war and make a lot more sincere effort to promote the cause of peace. But this has been going on for a long time, and both administrations have been doing this. And this is the reason that the message of liberty actually brings people together. Because individuals see that the parties aren't doing a very good job. You're like one party, they cut the spending, they raise the debt and the spending as well. Another party is supposed to do the job. They go in and nothing changes. So if you look at the candidates today, there is very little difference except for one. The rest The rest of the candidates support the status quo. Foreign policies never change. Monetary policy doesn't change. There's no challenge to the Federal Reserve System. And most of all, there's no desire to protect personal liberty, personal privacy, protect us from the intrusiveness of the federal government, to protect your right to use the internet. These are the kind of things that are so important to so many people, and unfortunately that is not offered. I believe it is the offering up of a program that emphasizes personal liberty, the Constitution, sound monetary policy, and a sensible foreign policy is the reason the momentum is building and the reason why we're getting such a great reception here in North Dakota. We're in the midst of a financial crisis. The financial crisis is the biggest one in the history of the world. There was a time when we were a creditor nation. We would have ups and downs, but we were a creditor nation, and we had a lot of productivity, we had a lot of wealth, and we had borrowing power. Today, we are a debtor nation. We are the biggest debtor nation in the history of the world. Our productivity is going down drastically. We create no significant new jobs. At the same time, there's never a lack of a desire for more spending. So what we should be proposing, and what I propose, is in the first year to cut the budget in real terms by $1 trillion. The proposal by others is to cut the proposed increases. The proposed increases, called baseline budgeting, they assume that the budget will go up by $10+ trillion in the next 10 years. So if they talk about cutting $1 trillion, they're talking about cutting $100 billion a year of proposed increases, which means there's zero cuts. What I'm talking about are real cuts, actually cutting, but you can't do this unless you change policy. If you expect to have the entitlement system, have welfare benefits from cradle to grave, free housing, free food, and free medical care, and free education, you can't do it. If you expect to continue to be the policeman of the world and advocate preemptive war and going into country and occupying countries, if you want that kind of foreign policy, you cannot do it. And you know what will happen if we don't change policy? We are going to end up in a financial crash. There is going to be a dollar crisis, and we are all going to suffer the consequences. So it is in our best interest, not only of the younger generation, but everybody. We're not passing this on to the next generation. We passed it on to this current generation. That is why it's so vital that we get a handle on things, understand what liberty is all about, what the Constitution means, and why limited government and personal liberty and property rights is the road to peace and prosperity. It has been said that no army can stop an idea whose time has come. And the idea of returning this country to the principles of liberty, that idea is alive and well and growing by leaps and bounds. And that is why this country is changing significantly. The message is loud and clear and growing exponentially. And I am optimistic to believe that we can turn this around, but we have to cut the spending. Now, a lot of people say, well, you can cut this, this, and this, and I actually have a transitional program. I want to cut $1 trillion, but I want to have priorities. And I want to really start with the overseas spending. The overseas spending and the welfare and the occupation, we ought to all be able to agree that spend the money here at home if you have to, but not overseas. So therefore, I want to protect certain budget programs. For instance, we made promises to the elderly. They're dependent now, medical care and Social Security and child health care. And actually, my plan will actually protect those individuals. What about protecting the infrastructure, protecting those states and parts of the country that need money for, ports and the Intracoastal Canal and flood projects? Would I vote for that, and would I advocate it by adding more debt and borrowing? No, I would not. But let me tell you how we could do it. We could do it by cutting spending overseas to such an extent you actually cut the deficit and put the money that you want to for some programs in back here at home, not to raise taxes and not to raise the debt and actually lower the debt and don't increase the spending. We can do that by working our way out. For instance, a few years ago, they built an embassy in Baghdad. An embassy we didn't need, and it was close to $1 billion. But that was only the beginning. This year, the appropriation for that embassy was nearly $5 billion to operate it. Now, let's say we need a project here at home. Why can't we cut that $5 billion out, forget about that embassy in Baghdad? That's only going to lead to trouble. Take it and cut it in half. Take $2.5 billion off the deficit and spend the $2.5 billion here back at home on projects that we need. But there is no doubt that you can't have economic reform and economic growth unless you look at the monetary policy. Financial bubbles are caused for a reason, and they come from excessive credit, artificially low interest rates, excessive spending by the Federal Reserve System. So if we want sound economic policy, we have to address that subject. But you know, if we do all these things, we still have another major problem, and that is the ultimate responsibility of the government, the real purpose of the Constitution, the real purpose of what a republic should be about. It isn't to have welfare from cradle to grave. It isn't for us to be the policemen of the world. But the government, the limited government that we should have in a constitutional republic, should be designed to protect our liberties and nothing else. That should be the responsibility of the government. And this, of course, includes a strong national defense, but not an offense. It should be a defense. We should defend our country as necessary. If we go to war, if the wars have to be fought, they should be fought. One, get them over with, and get the troops back home as quickly as possible. But there has been a steady erosion of personal liberties in this country, and that is what we have been so careless about. But that's been going on for a long time. It got especially bad in the last 10 years or so. 9/11 helped create this. That was a terrible, terrible day, but I think the assessment was wrong, because the assessment was it had something to do with Iraq. And so therefore, they used 9/11 as an excuse to go to Iraq, invade Iraq, fight a war there as well as Afghanistan. And that was not the cause. Al-Qaeda was not in Iraq, and they had no weapons of mass destruction, and that attitude is continued to this very day, because there are a bunch of people up in Washington right now, and other candidates think that we can't wait till we go into Syria and into Iran. That makes no sense. We can't afford it. It won't help it, and it won't give us more defense. But we have been careless about the protection of our civil liberties. For instance, right after 9/11, they passed a bill which was absolutely misnamed. They called it the Patriot Act. It should have been called the Unpatriotic Act. No, and if that bill would have been properly named and called it Repeal of the Fourth Amendment Act, it would have never been passed. But it is the Patriot Act that allows our government agents to invade our premises, in our houses, invade our internet, our emails, and whatever they want to look at without a proper search warrant. Something the founders explicitly fought a revolution on and put it in the Fourth Amendment, the right of privacy. Today we have it turned upside down. We don't have privacy, but we have too much secrecy in government. We need much more openness of government and much more protection of our privacy as individuals. As frustrating as it might get at times, we do have victories. We've had one here recently in the last month or so, because there was a bill floating around, Stop Online Piracy Act. And this was an effort for the federal government to take over and control the internet. But a lot of people like you got word of it and sent a message. And Washington, even though they had majority votes in both the House and the Senate, once they heard from the people, they withdrew those bills, they took them off, and they are no longer pushing through the Congress. So the people have to be heard. And besides, how are we going to spread our message without the internet? But also, since that time, we've had other things that are discouraging as far as undermining personal liberties. The president announced a year ago that it was legal for him, as president and the commander-in-chief, that he would now be allowed to assassinate American citizens without a trial or without charges. And to prove that point, he's done it on 3 occasions. So that is the law according to the president. And when they asked him about this, where does it say in the Constitution you can assassinate an American citizen? He said, well, I can do anything I want except those things that are explicitly denied to me in the Constitution. I think he has that twisted around a bit. The president only has the authority to do the things that he has the explicit authority to do, and the rest he's not allowed to do. Which means a president, I promise to be that type of president, I will not legislate by executive orders. I'll use the executive orders to repeal all those executive orders that are unconstitutional. But it's not only the president that is undermining our personal liberties. The Congress laid it on a platter here just in December. They passed the National Defense Authorization Act. And here's a bill that many of you already know about it. It means that the president now has the authority to use the military to arrest an American citizen anytime he so chooses, if he wants to. No charges, no trial, no attorney, held in a secret prison indefinitely. That is not what America is all about. That bill needs to repeal. But we can solve our problems by just finding the people who will read the Constitution, obey the Constitution, and emphasize personal liberty. Liberty will bring people together. Today, we're very divisive because all they're doing is fighting over power. Who's going to control the money? Which faction is going to control it? They all support the same foreign policy, the same monetary policy, the welfare system, the deficits, the whole mess. And they fight over the control and the power and who's going to get the benefits. But true liberty brings us together because people get to use the liberty the way they see fit. It's your life. You should do with your life what you want. People shouldn't tell you how to run your life as long as you don't hurt other people. If we carried that thought through, that means that if our life and our liberties come from our Creator, we ought to have the natural right to keep the fruits of all our labors also. But if we see people as individuals and not in groups, groups should never be punished because they belong to a group, but groups should not have any benefits because they belong to a group. But all of us should come together, no matter how diverse we are, because there will be a difference in how we use our liberty, how we want to spend our money, what our social values are, what church we go to. So we should all come together in the defense of liberty, and then we should be left alone, and government should butt out of our lives and off our back and out of our wallets. So, and this is where we have the good news. This message is coming out loud and clear, and people are joining us. Especially, I'm so delighted to see the young people because they are energized by this. But there are many now that aren't so young, but young in spirit. And they know this too. And they know that the status quo isn't working. The financial system, the Keynesian economic theory isn't working. We have to do something better. And we've had a taste of this. We had the best example of a free society ever. We had the largest and the richest middle class ever. And we are now, unfortunately, letting it slip away. So we have to recapture this. And this is emphasizing personal liberty, the Constitution, sound money, property rights, Second Amendment rights. And also Also, of course, a sensible foreign policy of national defense. That is the only alternative to what we have today. If you seek, as I do, peace and prosperity, it can be found by restoring the great values of this country. And if we do that, I'll tell you what, the whole world will benefit. So often today they believe that so many want to promote our presence around the world because they say that we are an exceptional nation. We are, and we have been. But you can't push your exceptionalism on other countries by force. You can't go and invade and bomb people and say, we're exceptional, you got to live the way we do. But if we set a standard of individual liberty and prosperity and peace, the rest of the world will notice. Then they will want to emulate us. It's much easier to promote our cause through peaceful means than it is through war. And this is what we have. This is what we have to offer. We don't have to go backwards. We go pick up some pieces and we move forward and refine the understanding of liberty like it's never been understood before. And it's only been tested a short period of time in this country. And a lot of times they'll accuse us of wanting to go backwards. But let me tell you, those who accuse us of wanting to go backwards are going backwards toward tyranny, and we don't need to go in that direction. So I don't think it's difficult to define the problems. I think the answers can be found, and this is what we're all about today. And today, especially because it's an election, I want to make sure that everybody tonight goes out and votes and make a statement for this cause. Because if we truly want to promote the cause of liberty and restore its greatness, we can find it very easily in the cause of liberty. And I want to thank you for joining me tonight and joining us in this effort to restore liberty to this great country. Thank you very much.